Subtitles made by Dima. Subtitles made by Dima.
New massive missile strikes by Russia on residential buildings in the Kyiv region have claimed 14 more lives and hundreds of people have been evacuated from the impact zone. And in Vishnev alone, the Russians destroyed 5 entire streets with a single strike. Explosions were heard all night in Kyiv, and they continued into the morning. The new massive attack on Kyiv on the night of July 6 showed that, unfortunately, Ukrainian air defense systems are critically failing to stop ballistic missiles. Ukraine has already initiated an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council. Well, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, plans to discuss strengthening air defense at the NATO summit tomorrow, July 7 in Ankara. And there, let me remind you, he will meet with Trump and all the NATO leaders. And it is precisely this summit that may be connected to these brutal attacks by the Russians. It is known that at the NATO summit, Donald Trump will meet with Volodymyr Zelensky, after which he will call Vladimir Putin. And right now it is vital for the Kremlin to show the Americans, to show Trump personally, that Russia is supposedly winning, and that's why they need to put pressure specifically on NATO. In this episode, we will discuss everything that is known at this moment, everything related to this brutal attack by the Russians on Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukraine has struck back. In particular, it is known that the Omsk oil refinery was hit. This is the largest oil refinery in Russia. It is located 2,500 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. In addition, today, Ukraine destroyed 2 tankers in the Sea of Azov. The tankers were carrying gasoline and were traveling from Taganrog to Crimea. Also, on land, 2 S-400 air defense systems, an oil depot in Kerch, and a Nebo-U radar station were hit. In general, as you understand, Ukraine is delivering retaliatory strikes against the Russians, who are attacking peaceful Ukrainian cities and destroying residential buildings. So, let's all discuss this together. I'm Alexei Pechi, let's discuss this together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like this episode, and don't forget to leave your comment under this video.
To be continued, to be continued, to be continued, to be continued. Subtitles by Dino. Subtitles by Dima Torzak. Thank you.
So, Kyiv and the region. Last night, on the night of July 6th, were once again subjected to a massive missile and drone attack by the Russians. According to the authorities, at least 12 people were killed in Kyiv and about 60 were injured, including 2 children. In the Kyiv region, 3 people were killed and another 16 were injured. And I emphasize these are only preliminary figures for now, because search and rescue operations are still ongoing. The mayor of Kyiv, Vitaly Klitschko, reported that 27 injured people, including children, are currently in hospitals. According to the authorities, the number of victims may still increase as search and rescue operations are ongoing. Ukraine is currently initiating an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council because of the massive missile strikes by Russia, specifically targeting peaceful cities. And now I will quote the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Andrei Sybiga. Every Russian missile launched at Ukraine carries a message that goes far beyond our borders. Its goal is to convince the world that violence can replace law, that fear is stronger than solidarity, and that cruelty goes unpunished. Delay or a weak response cannot stop terror. Only decisive and timely actions can do that. At the same time, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky was preparing for the NATO summit in Ankara, which will take place on July 7 and 8, where he will meet with the American president and all NATO leaders. He stated that Russia continues to destroy civilian homes with impunity while the whole world simply watches. That is why Ukraine expects strong decisions from the NATO summit that will help stop this terror. Zelensky noted that Ukrainian defenders are demonstrating the highest effectiveness in fighting drones and cruise missiles, but Russian ballistic missiles remain a difficult target due to a shortage of interceptor missiles. Next is a quote from Zelensky. It is very important that the world, especially America and our European partners, come out of the NATO summit in Ankara with strong decisions to support our air defense and therefore the protection of the lives of ordinary people. As long as Patriot missiles remain in the warehouses of our allies, it only encourages Russia to continue striking residential buildings. The US and Europe have enough power to stop this terror. And unfortunately, last night, every single ballistic missile and Zircon missile broke through Ukraine's air defense. The radiotechnical troops of the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine recorded 419. Air attack assets, including 68 missiles of various types and 351 strike drones. The enemy's missile arsenal consisted of the following types: 6 anti-ship missiles Zircon or Onyx, which were launched from the Kursk region of the Russian Federation; 23 ballistic missiles from Iskander-M or S-400 systems launched from the Bryansk, Oryol, and Kursk regions; 33 Kh-101 cruise missiles launched from the Vologda region, 6 Kaliber cruise missiles launched from Novorossiysk. That's why we need to strike Novorossiysk even harder. Out of all the missiles launched, air defense forces managed to shoot down 31 K-101 cruise missiles and 6 Caliber missiles. Unfortunately, all of the ballistic missiles and Zircon missiles broke through. This indicates a critical shortage of missiles for air defense systems, Patriot, and this issue definitely needs to be raised at the NATO summit. Moreover, Zelensky himself admitted that not a single ballistic or anti-ship missile was intercepted. This is precisely due to the critical shortage of interceptor missiles for the Patriot systems. This was also confirmed by the head of the communications department of the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Yuri Ignat. Here is his quote. "To shoot down ballistic missiles, you need to have something to shoot them down with. We have enough systems. What we need is a constant supply of missiles. We have a serious shortage of interceptor missiles." At the time of recording this episode, there are already 14 dead and 60 wounded in Kyiv. Among them, unfortunately, are children. At the moment, rescuers are working at more than 20 locations. The most difficult situation is in the Darnitsky and Podilsky districts of the Ukrainian capital, where Russian troops hit residential high-rise buildings. According to the State Emergency Service, a 9-story building was damaged in the Podilsky district. Apartments were destroyed there from the 9th to the 5th floor. A non-residential building and a garage cooperative were also damaged. Cars burned there. In the Donetsky district, debris damaged a 25-story residential building. In another high-rise, there was a fire in apartments covering about 150 square meters. A garage cooperative also caught fire. In another 30-story building, there was a fire caused by falling debris. In the Holosivsky district of the capital, a non-residential building caught fire, and in Obolonsky, a warehouse building and the area of non-residential development. According to the State Emergency Service, search and rescue operations are still ongoing as there may still be people trapped under the rubble. But besides the capital, the consequences of the Russian attack have also been recorded in the Kyiv region. According to the head of the Kyiv Regional Military Administration, Mykola Kalashnik, 3 people were killed and another 26 were injured as a result of the attack. This is as of the time of recording. Among the injured are 2 children, a 9-month-old baby and a 12-year-old child. The head of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, Ihor Klimenko, reported that more than 6,600 people have already been evacuated from Vaishneva, where the strike hit last night due to the threat of repeated detonation. Right now, repeated detonations are continuing in the city. Searches are also ongoing in the basements for places where people might have been hiding during the attack. Officials are determining which civilians still need to be evacuated. And now, a quote from Klimenko. The consequences are terrible. Almost 5 streets have been completely destroyed. In terms of scale, that's from dozens of houses to 100. There are many fires. Utility services are working. A large-scale response effort has been organized on site. Resilience centers have also already been set up, as well as temporary headquarters for dealing with the aftermath, where operational tents have been deployed. There are also mobile support buses where you can file a report, make a statement, or ask a question, or raise a concern in order to receive quality professional advice. On site, by the way, psychologists, social services, rescuers, medical staff, and police are already working. In general, all the services that can help the civilian population are present. So, if someone is watching my broadcast from there, know that you can turn to these buses for help. Basically, you can even approach any police officer you see. They will tell you where to go for help, where to file a report, and so on and so on and so on. In general, help will definitely be provided to everyone. There is a significant deterioration in air quality in the city. In fact, it is about 5 times above normal levels. Citizens within the emergency zone have been urged to close their windows and follow the rules recommended by specialists. If this is not done, there is a risk of poisoning from hazardous substances that are currently in the air.
Continued. To be continued. To be continued. To be continued. Okay, that's it. To be continued. That's all.
Meanwhile, the Ukrainian Air Force has warned that Russia may launch another missile strike on Ukraine in the near future. Let me remind you that the previous massive attack happened on July 2nd and the new one already on the 6th. The interval between them was only 4 days, but it could be shorter or longer. And now, the spokesperson for the Ukrainian Air Force, Yuri Ignat, explained why the intervals between the strikes differ. It's the production of missiles. It's a complex and lengthy process. And on average, such attacks are repeated about once every 10 days. But Ignat added that the enemy can change the frequency of the strikes. He noted that now the Russians can strike even the day after a previous attack. And let me remind you that before the attack on July 2, there was already information that the Russians had built up enough missiles for 2 or 3 consecutive attacks. Therefore, it is quite possible that in the near future a third attack may occur, which unfortunately will bring new destruction. And now, in Russia itself, they have already explained what exactly they were hitting this time. What kind of super important targets, namely residential buildings, did they shell today? And so, the so-called Ministry of Defense of Russia confirmed the night strike on Ukraine. They claimed that Russian troops supposedly hit their targets. Further, I quote, military industrial enterprises, fuel and energy facilities in Kyiv and Kyiv region, as well as military airfield infrastructure in Dnipropetrovsk, Poltava, Cherkasy, Chernihiv, and Kyiv regions. The Russian Ministry of Defense also claims that the strike was carried out, quote, in response to Ukraine's attacks on civilian infrastructure on Russian territory. Let me emphasize once again, Russia, as the aggressor and main initiator of this entire war, can never, even hypothetically, carry out so-called retaliatory strikes. Because all of its actions are an initial act of aggression which led to all subsequent strikes on Russian territory. Causal relationships tell us that Russia was the first to initiate the war. Russia was the first. Illegally and unprovoked, it attacked Ukraine on February 24, 2022. Russia was the first to unprovokedly seize Crimea and start the bloodshed in the Ukrainian Donbass. Accordingly, everything that flies into Russia is a retaliatory strike. This is the right to self-defense according to Article 51 of the UN Charter. Everything that Russia does, these are all acts of aggression. These are not retaliatory strikes at all. An aggressor cannot respond or, as they claim, defend themselves. Right now they are trying to completely turn all the rhetoric of international law upside down. And they are trying to claim that they supposedly used Article 51 of the UN Charter on self-defense. And they are just defending themselves and launching retaliatory strikes so that nothing flies into Russian territory. Russians who continue to watch my shows, I'm saying this right now, especially for you. Russia was the first to attack Ukraine. And as soon as Russia stops any attacks on Ukraine, as soon as Russia withdraws all its unwashed, wild Russian soldiers from the territory of Ukraine, everything will end. You won't have to answer for anything. There will be no strikes on Russia's infrastructure at that very moment. As soon as the last Russian soldier leaves the territory of Ukraine, that's it. The war ends just like that. Instantly. So, well, basically, I understand that, yes. The savages need to keep pushing this nonsense that they're supposedly carrying out retaliatory strikes. And unfortunately, to my great regret, the Russian people really are a herd that continues to believe in all this. That's it. They claim they're defending themselves and launching retaliatory strikes and so on. That's it. Well, and obviously today the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation issued this statement that they really did deliver a retaliatory strike. And I'll give you another quote here. The Russian Ministry of Defense stated that on the night of July 6th, Kyiv attacked Russian territory with 625 drones, of which 613 were shot down or suppressed. So as they put it, I'll quote further. The Ministry of Defense believes that the goal of the attack was Zelensky's attempt to demonstrate to Western sponsors ahead of the NATO summit his willingness to strike civilian targets in Russia on Ukrainian territory using their money. Kyiv's main efforts were focused on trying to damage facilities and logistics of the fuel and energy complex. From the territory of Ukraine, civilian targets in Russia, including in the Leningrad, Yaroslavl, Kaluga regions, and in Crimea. The Russian military foiled a massive attack planned for the NATO summit by shooting down and suppressing the overwhelming majority of Ukrainian drones. well, and so on. In general, they are now trying to claim, according to the Ministry of Defense, that the purpose of the attack was supposedly to use the NATO summit to demonstrate to the West their readiness, well, and so on. Basically, they are now trying to show readiness. Это нам надо перед саммитом НАТО что-то показать. And now, pay attention to what Russia itself is doing. First of all, Vladimir Putin, before he knew for sure that on July 4th there would definitely be a phone conversation with Trump, because Trump would be receiving calls with congratulations on the 250th anniversary of the proclamation of US independence. And before that, he came out and announced that they had supposedly captured Konstantinovka. And so after the conversation with Trump on July 4th, what does his aide Ushakov come out and say? He says that Vladimir Putin emphasized to Donald Trump the realities on the ground. He stressed that the Russian army is supposedly winning. He emphasized that Russia had captured Konstantinovka, and so on and so forth. So, in other words, he needs to create an image of triumphant victory, that we are winning. And to show Trump, like, listen, it's pointless for you to help Ukraine, pointless to support Zelensky. Why? Because, well, there's no point, because they're losing. Look, we've captured new territories. We're launching massive attacks and destroying Kyiv. We're demolishing residential buildings. So that's why it's better to put pressure directly on Zelensky. That's all. And it's obvious that before the NATO summit, they deliberately launched 2 waves of attacks with a 4-day interval to show that we can strike frequently. So it's better if you somehow stop Zelensky there so that he stops defending himself. And then the war will be over. This is an attempt to put pressure not on Ukraine, but on Trump and on European leaders. And right now it's important to understand that Ukraine, as they say, needs to do what it has to do. It is reported that right at the moment of recording this video, Kyiv time is 14:30, and it is reported that just now there was another strike on a Russian oil refinery. It is located more than 2,000 kilometers from our border, and most likely this will be a record in general in terms of the situation. And now Russian media are writing that from this moment on, we can consider that Ukraine has struck absolutely all key oil refineries in Russia. The Omsk refinery was the last of the 11 refineries that hadn't been hit. That's it. Now the Omsk refinery has been struck. Finally, as we discussed in previous episodes, there was literally one facility left that needed to be hit, and the story will be finished after that. I mean, finished in terms of hitting all the oil refineries, and if we've managed to reach even there, then we need to keep systematically striking these refineries. Let me emphasize once again, all of Russia's strikes are acts of aggression. Unfortunately, I see that even some Ukrainians have started to think that supposedly these are just retaliatory strikes. There are no retaliatory strikes. They started this war and now they're taking a beating. Putin understands perfectly well that his economy is burning, the oil refineries are burning. Russians will start asking questions sooner or later, and that's why he needs to create an image of victory mania. Instead of Russians now discussing, for example, the fact that all their key oil refineries have been hit, they will be discussing strikes on Kyiv, strikes on Vishnev, about how they allegedly struck some Neptune missile production facility, as they say, that an evacuation is underway and so on. So that they discuss this, and not what's happening in their own unwashed Russia. By the way, the expression unwashed Russia wasn't coined by me. I know that Russians, for some reason, get very offended by this, but actually, the phrase unwashed Russia belongs to your compatriot. Well, apparently, after living in this filth, he himself understood perfectly well what he was talking about. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel. You can do this by donating through the links and details in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone. Subtitles.